All right, welcome to another deep dive. We've got a really interesting one today. This is Grunch of Giants by R. Buckminster Fuller. So this is a book that a listener sent in,
Yeah.
and I gotta say this is a dense book. This is not a light read.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating book, and there are a lot of interesting ideas in here. But we're gonna try to pull out some of the core ideas from this book and talk about those.
Yeah. Fuller really packs a lot into this one.
Yeah, it's from 1983.
Right.
So, he's writing about technology and economics and where, he sees the future of humanity going.
Yeah, and I think, even though it's from 1983, there are some things that he talks about that are still really relevant today.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, a lot of his ideas about the way that the world works, the way that systems work, the way that technology is impacting us, the way that economics is impacting us.
Hmm.
I think a lot of those things are still very much in play today.
Right. And especially for our listener who's interested in seeing things from multiple perspectives
Yeah.
and really getting to like a fundamental understanding of how the world works.
Yeah.
Fuller's view is really, really valuable.
Right. And also just for avoiding kind of the overwhelm that can come from looking at all of the different problems in the world.
Mm,
I think Fuller offers a kind of a different perspective on how to approach those problems.
absolutely.
So one of the central arguments I think that Fuller makes in this book is that the fundamental problem, like the biggest problem we face, is not actually a lack of resources,
Yeah.
but rather the belief that there's a lack of
See, that's
resources.
the mindset.
Yeah, so it's this mentality of scarcity that he calls it. This
Yeah.
you or me mentality, which leads to conflict and unsustainable systems.
Yeah, we see this all the time, right? Like, oh, there's only so much to go around.
Yeah,
So if you get some, I get less.
right.
And that really drives a lot of the problems that we see.
Right. It's a zero-sum game,
Exactly.
and Fuller is arguing that that's not actually the case.
Yeah, he's basically saying that we have the resources, we have the technology to provide for everyone.
Yeah.
But we're stuck in this mindset of scarcity.
Right. And so then from that basic idea comes this very distinctive term that he coins, which is grunch.
Right.
Or Grunch of Giants, or the full acronym is Gross Universe Cash Heist.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
So, what is Grunch? Like, what does he mean by this term?
So grunge is basically Fuller's way of describing this invisible army of giants. And these giants are not, the giants of folklore. They're
Right.
not, big, tall people. They're the interconnected owners who control like these vast global systems.
Yeah.
So, think about like the infrastructure of the world.
Yeah.
We've got air travel, we've got satellites, we've got these massive cities with skyscrapers, we've got these complex financial networks,
Yeah.
and even a lot of the research and development that drives technological progress.
Yeah.
All of that is controlled by this small group of interconnected owners.
Right. And he kind of traces this. He kind of traces this back to World War II, right?
Yeah.
And the rise of what Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex.
Right, and it's not quite the same as like the old international cartels.
Right.
Like pre-World War II, you had these cartels that controlled things like copper or tin.
Right.
But Fuller's arguing that the grunge is something different. It's operating on a more fundamental level,
Yeah.
and it's also a lot more invisible. So these giants, they're not just controlling physical resources.
Yeah.
They're controlling the underlying technologies, the chemical processes, the new metals, the electronics, the cybernetics,
Yeah.
the financial credit,
Yeah.
the ability to initiate mass production.
Yeah.
And they're also controlling knowledge.
Right.
Fuller talks about how these giants would recruit promising science students before they even graduated,
Oh.
essentially locking up crucial theoretical understanding.
Yeah. So they want to control the intellectual property as well as the actual physical resources.
Right, exactly.
So it's a much more insidious form of control.
Yeah, it's not as obvious.
Right.
It's not like you can just point to a factory and say, "Oh, that's part of the grunge."
Right.
It's much more diffuse, it's much more interconnected, it's much more global.
Right. It's kind of like the operating system of the world in a way.
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
know, it's the underlying code that's running everything.
Yeah, and Fuller's point is that most people aren't even aware of this.
Right.
That they're not aware of this invisible force that's shaping their lives.
Right. So then this leads to what Fuller sees as this kind of this tragedy, this kind of this invisibility in the way that it distorts our priorities.
Yeah.
And he makes this really jarring comparison. He talks about the number of people who died daily from starvation
Right.
versus the death toll of the Hiroshima bombing,
Yeah.
which is horrifying, when you think about it.
It's shocking.
Especially because we produce more than enough food globally to feed everyone.
Exactly, and that's what Fuller's getting at.
Yeah.
He's saying, look, we have the resources, we have the technology to feed everyone,
Yeah.
but we're not doing it. And why not?
Yeah.
Because our priorities are distorted.
Right.
We're focused on these other things like weapons.
Yeah, he mentions the figure of like $6.5 trillion spent on weaponry over 33 years,
Right.
which is just, it's an astronomical
It's an
sum.
insane amount of money.
And he's arguing that all of that is driven by this belief in scarcity.
Yeah, this idea that there's not enough to go around,
Right.
so we have to fight over it.
Right. And this is where it gets, really interesting.
Yeah.
He argues that by 1970, humanity had actually achieved the metaphysical know-how to support every single person on the planet at a high standard of living.
That's a bold claim.
Yeah, and we can do it, he says, using minimal daily solar energy.
So how did we get there? How did he think we crossed that threshold?
Yeah, he talks about what he calls progressive ephemeralization.
Progressive ephemeralization. Okay, I like that term.
Yeah.
What does that mean exactly?
Yep. So progressive ephemeralization is basically the idea that technology allows us to do more with less.
Okay.
It's about achieving greater functionality and performance with fewer physical resources.
I see.
So, think about your phone.
Yeah.
Right? Your phone has more computing power than a room-sized computer from a few decades ago.
Right.
That's progressive ephemeralization.
Right.
It's doing more with less.
Yeah.
And he points to several examples of this threshold being crossed between 1969 and 1980.
Okay.
So, obviously the moon landing is a big one.
Yeah.
We were able to land on the moon using, comparatively small amounts of resources
Right.
when you think about what was achieved.
Yeah.
He also talks about the South Pole Dome, communication satellites, the computer revolution itself, lasers, and even the human-powered and solar-powered flights by MacCready.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, the image of a plane with a 95-foot wingspan that weighs only 45 pounds is it's just amazing.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So much with so little.
Right, exactly. So he's arguing that we have this potential. We've had this potential for decades now.
Right.
To create a world where everyone can thrive.
Yeah.
But we haven't done it. So then the question is, what are the obstacles?
Right. What's holding us back?
Yeah, what's holding us back? And he identifies several key obstacles.
Yeah, okay.
The first one is the invisibility of technology.
Okay.
So, we just take for granted all of the incredibly complex systems
Yeah.
that make our lives possible.
Right.
We don't even think about it.
We just flip a switch and the lights come on. We turn on the tap and water comes out.
Exactly.
We don't think about all the infrastructure that's behind that.
Right. All the work that went into making that possible.
Yeah.
The second obstacle is over-specialization. So, we've got all these experts in these narrow fields.
Yeah.
But they can't see how their work connects to the bigger picture.
Right.
And they can't see how it could be used to create these broader solutions.
So it's like they're all working on pieces of a puzzle,
Yeah.
but they don't know what the puzzle is.
Right, exactly. And then the third obstacle is a lack of familiarity with successful alternative ways of living and working.
Yeah.
So he's arguing that there are solutions out there.
Yeah.
There are ways of doing things that would work,
Yeah.
but we're just not familiar with them.
Right.
We're stuck in these old patterns, these old ways of thinking.
Or we're stuck in the ruts.
Yeah, exactly. And so he sees these as the main obstacles to achieving what he calls universal success.
Okay, so what's the solution? What does he propose we do about all of this?
Well, he talks a lot about the role of technology, and he makes this distinction between uh, living Siri and killing Puri.
Living by and killing period. Those are pretty self-explanatory terms.
Yeah, right. Living purity is all the technology and systems that are designed to support human well-being.
Oh, yeah.
And killing Bari is weaponry, systems of destruction.
Right.
And he very much believes that the key to a better future is through what he calls the intelligent application of technology
Okay.
to reshape our environment.
Okay.
And he feels that if we can design systems that inherently support human needs,
Yeah.
then a lot of the social and political problems that we have
Yeah.
will just kind of disappear.
Okay, so it's not about reforming people.
Right.
It's about reforming the environment.
Exactly. It's about creating systems that work.
Yeah.
And he didn't just talk about this. He dedicated a huge part of his life to developing living period prototypes.
Right. He was a prolific inventor.
Yeah, so the foreword of the book actually lists a ton of his inventions.
Okay.
Some of them are quite famous, like tensegrity structures,
Right.
the geodesic dome.
Right. Yeah.
But others are a little more obscure.
Like what?
He invented a fog gun.
A fog gun.
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, I don't know exactly how it works, but it's a device that creates fog.
Interesting.
He also invented a compact, odorless toilet.
Okay, now that's something I could get behind.
Yeah, right. And all sorts of other things.
Yeah, I mean, his inventions really span like a wide range of fields and applications.
Yeah, and it shows his kind of comprehensive approach to what he called design science.
Design science.
Yeah.
So it's not just about inventing things.
Right.
It's about design. It's about understanding how things work.
Yeah, it's about solving problems, and it's about using technology to solve those problems in a way that benefits humanity.
Yeah.
And it's easy to look at some of his inventions and say, well, they weren't commercially successful.
Right.
He didn't get rich off of any of these inventions.
Right. He was more of an ideas guy than a businessman.
Yeah, and in fact, he notes that critics often called his inventions failures because they didn't make him wealthy.
But he didn't see it that way.
Right. He was very clear that his primary motivation was not financial gain.
Right.
He saw this kind of fundamental conflict between trying to make money and trying to make sense of the world.
Yeah. He was trying to solve problems, not just make a buck.
Right. And he understood that, different types of innovations have vastly different timelines.
Right.
Some things, in biology, things can happen very quickly.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about like major infrastructure changes,
Yeah.
Those things can take decades.
Right.
So, his goal was really to identify the solutions.
Yeah.
And to demonstrate their potential, not necessarily to bring every single idea to market himself.
Okay. Yeah.
And he even tells the story of the Fuller House.
The Fuller House.
Yeah.
What's that?
So the Fuller House was this house that he designed.
Okay.
That was very energy efficient and prefabricated.
Right.
And it generated a lot of excitement when it was first unveiled.
Okay.
But it ultimately ran into all these obstacles.
Like what?
There was no established industry for its production.
Right.
There were building codes that didn't account for its unconventional design.
Right.
There was union resistance to the prefabricated elements.
Okay.
And people had trouble getting mortgages for such a novel structure.
So even though it was a great idea,
Yeah.
the system wasn't ready for it.
Right, exactly. So, he understood that even the best ideas can run into these roadblocks.
Yeah.
The system is not ready for them.
Yeah.
And another major theme in the book is this increasing interconnectedness of humanity,
Correct.
which, is largely driven by technological progress.
Right.
And he talks about these two prime oppositely directed world encirclings.
Oppositely directed world encirclings. Okay, what does that mean?
So, he's talking about how, in ancient times,
Mhm.
people would travel around the world, that
Yeah.
they would circumnavigate the globe,
Right.
but they would do it in opposite directions.
Okay.
And so you had these two streams of human movement that
Yeah.
were going in opposite directions.
Okay.
And he says that this is still happening today,
Okay.
but it's happening much more rapidly.
Yeah.
And it's happening through technology.
Yeah, through things like air travel and satellites and the internet.
Right, exactly. So, we have airplanes that are constantly circling the
Yeah.
globe. We have satellites that are orbiting the Earth, and we have the internet, which is connecting people all over the world in real time.
Yeah.
And he sees this as this kind of inevitable trend.
Yeah.
This is where humanity is headed.
Towards greater interconnection.
Right, towards greater interconnection. And he sees the potential for this to create a truly global society.
A global society.
Yeah.
What does he call it?
He calls it total spaceship Earth.
Total spaceship Earth. I like that.
Yeah, the idea is that we're all on this planet together,
Yeah.
and we need to start thinking of ourselves as a crew.
Right. We're all crewmates.
Exactly. But he also points out that this is in tension with existing political structures.
Right, because we're still divided into nation states.
Yeah, he uses this great analogy of 150 admirals on spaceship Earth.
150 admirals,
Yeah.
each with their own little fleet.
Exactly. And they're all more concerned with their own little fleet than they are with the overall well-being of the spaceship.
Right. So we're kind of stuck in this old paradigm
Right.
of nation states.
Yeah.
While at the same time, technology is pushing us towards greater global integration.
Right. Exactly. And he also talks about how this shift from, largely isolated and illiterate populations
Yeah.
to this more mobile, interconnected, increasingly literate world.
Yeah.
This is a profound transformation.
Right. And this is where the grunch comes back in.
Right.
How does Fuller see these supranational corporations operating in this new world?
Well, he argues that they really gained momentum after World War II.
Okay.
And they often benefited from know-how that was developed using public funds.
Public funds.
Yeah, so a lot of the technological advancement
Yeah.
that came out of World War II and the Cold War and the space race.
Right.
A lot of that was funded by taxpayers.
Yeah.
But then it was leveraged by these private corporations for their own profit.
Right.
So he's talking about things like the Manhattan Project, the space program, all of this research and development that was done
Right.
using public money.
Yeah.
And then it was taken by these corporations and used to make them rich.
Right.
And he emphasizes this growing control of U.S. industry
Right.
by a relatively small number of very large corporations.
Right. So the grunch is getting bigger and more powerful.
Right, exactly. And he also highlights their fundamental legal obligation
Okay.
to maximize shareholder profit.
Right. They have a fiduciary duty.
Yeah, and often, without any real regard for broader social or environmental consequences.
Yeah. So it's not really their fault.
Yeah.
It's the system that's set up this way.
Right. It's the system that's incentivizing them to behave this
Yeah.
way. And he's very skeptical of the idea of corporations acting out of altruism.
Right. Because altruism doesn't really fit into that framework of maximizing shareholder profit.
Exactly. And he even discusses this concept of no-risk capitalism.
No risk capitalism.
Yeah.
Okay, what's that?
So, he's talking about how these giants, these supranational corporations,
Right.
they're so big
Yeah.
and they're so interconnected,
Right.
and they have so much influence
Yeah.
that they're essentially too big to fail.
Right. So they can take risks.
Yeah.
That smaller companies couldn't.
Exactly. And if they do fail,
Yeah.
the government will bail them out.
Right. So there's no real downside for them.
Right, exactly. And he also talks about this disconnect between the perception of national ownership
Okay.
and the reality of supranational control.
Supranational control.
Yeah, he gives examples like skyscrapers in Honolulu being owned by Japanese banks, or Arabian oil billionaires owning buildings in American cities.
Yeah. So the physical location of the assets
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily tell you who really owns them.
Right, exactly. And he argues that this is happening more and more,
Yeah.
as the world becomes more globalized,
Yeah.
and that the lines between national ownership and supranational control are becoming increasingly blurred.
Right.
And he even mentions the sentiment that was expressed by the U.S. ambassador to the UN,
Okay.
who said that a lot of nations hated the USA.
Hated the USA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Fuller's interpretation of that is not that they hated the American people,
Okay.
but that they hated the actions of grunge.
Right. They hated the influence of these supranational corporations.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And he even suggests that someone like Reagan, even a leader like Reagan,
Yeah.
might not have been fully aware of the true scale and nature of this supranational entity.
Right.
But he does offer this kind of interesting possibility that
Yes.
that the same grunge,
Yeah.
driven by its increasingly sophisticated computer systems,
Right.
could potentially become a force for positive global integration,
Okay.
because they would recognize
Yeah.
that it's actually more efficient
Yeah.
to have a world that functions well for everyone.
Right. So they could kind of turn their power to the good.
Right, exactly. But that's kind of a hopeful possibility.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily something that he's predicting will happen.
Right.
And then he takes this kind of broader historical view of these giants,
Okay.
and he kind of traces their evolution
Okay.
from, the physical strength
Yeah.
of figures like David and Goliath or Roland,
Okay.
to the more abstract legal entities of corporations.
Right. So the nature of power has changed over time.
Right, exactly. And he also examines the development of tools.
Tools.
Yeah, and he argues that tools are extensions of human capabilities,
Okay.
both physical and what he calls metaphysical, like mathematics.
A physical tool.
Yeah, so he's talking about things like language
Oh.
and mathematics
That's right.
as tools that extend our mental abilities.
Okay.
And he makes this distinction between craft tools,
Okay.
which are used by individuals,
Yeah.
and industrial tools, which require the coordinated efforts of many people.
Right.
And he tells this interesting story about someone advising him never to make things too simple.
Too simple.
Yeah, if you want it to be successful.
Why not?
Because the system rewards complexity.
The system rewards complexity.
Yeah.
How so?
Well, if you make things too simple,
Yeah.
then people can't charge as much for them.
Right.
They can't make as much money off of them.
Okay. So there's this kind of built-in incentive
Right.
to make things more complicated than they need to be.
Exactly. And he highlights the significance of the horse-mounted warrior
Okay.
as this kind of new giant in his era.
Yeah.
And then he follows the development of the high seas sailing ship
Right.
as this major driver of wealth creation.
Okay.
Which required military backing and significant capital investment.
So we're seeing this kind of this trend towards larger and more complex systems.
Right, exactly. And then this leads into the evolution of finance.
With finance. Yeah.
Yeah, so